Chapter 12. Not So Jolly Christmas. Several weeks in December, it was time to do the final check on her surgery, confirming to Danielle that she had fully healed. Danielle asked her ND to do the preliminary check and make sure that the final little hole had healed up. We were all about to be shocked. The tiny little hole had not healed, and there was a far more serious problem now. A tube from a previous surgery had slipped down into her vagina. The doctor and Danielle couldn't believe it. Danielle was furious at the situation. Despite having a good attitude about her progress at this point, it was devastating to Danielle's spirit to have another serious situation. We talked with the ND about our options. Danielle's anger and frustration caused us to look to another doctor to help fix the problem. The discussion had led us to the conclusion that we didn't want to see the surgeon who caused the initial problem. We scheduled an appointment for the following Thursday to meet with an oncologist in Flagstaff. It wasn't going to be a very long adventure, as Flagstaff was only 40 minutes from Sedona. I made sure to bundle up Danielle in many layers of clothing since we were heading to practically freezing weather. I was fully expecting snow on the ground. The drive would be uneventful as I took a slow and easy drive through Oak Creek Canyon to Flagstaff. We also started to see the signs of recent snowfall that hit the area several days prior. The top of the canyon was a beautiful sight to behold, and we both marveled for a moment at the beauty. It felt so good to share such a beautiful moment with my wife. It didn't change how nervous she was about meeting with the new doctor. Google Maps had led us to a dead end at the main hospital. I had looked up the wrong office, and the staff informed us that we were not in the right location. I felt bad because we were already running a couple of minutes late. I quickly looked up the right location and made the trip around the block to the doctor's private offices. I walked Danielle to the door of the office and then proceeded to park the car around the corner. I made it just before Danielle was called back. Thankfully, we didn't have to wait very long. It wasn't a very long interaction with the doctor. To our great disappointment, we were not going to be able to have the doctor perform the surgery, and we should have had the doctor who installed the port also remove it. We had the doctor schedule the appointment with the other doctor's office right there on the spot. We were going to have to wait another week to have this problem removed. They scheduled Danielle's surgery the day before Christmas Eve. It was a Tuesday, and the one day a week I always had off. My work schedule was looking like the 12 worst days of Christmas. On the first day of Christmas I would work. On the 5th day of Christmas, I would take my wife to her surgery, and I was not looking forward to another extended work week. The added problems of surgery were making things far harder on me than the month prior. Danielle was furious almost 24/7 leading up to the day of the surgery. The dissatisfaction she had with the medical industry was all that she could discuss. It wasn't healthy, and I wasn't making the situation any easier. Now I couldn't hide my anger towards the medical establishment. Danielle was constantly triggering my resentment for the for-profit medical industry. It didn't matter what Danielle complained about because I could always find a fault in how the medical field treats illness and disease. My concerns were less about Danielle's situation and more about the general situation people are forced to endure. I couldn't believe how much Danielle was forced to conform to the mainstream model, despite her constant protests. Danielle was worried about being put under again with anesthetics. Her digestive issues were always of concern, which is also why her diet was strict. Anesthesia was not part of her diet, and a guarantee that constipation issues would be present for a couple of weeks. It was almost impossible to calm this fear with Danielle. The stress of having to make the trip to Phoenix was building up a massive load of anxiety in both of us. Our mutual anger and frustrations were building off each other. We were frustrated that the doctor installed the port without permission in the first place, despite us giving him the authority to do anything necessary to remove her cancer. Danielle hated the port and even more what it stood for. She would regularly joke about the idea of using a chemo bath on her sensitive body. We both agreed adamantly about how destructive a chemo bath on her insides would have likely been. So it was not easy to see the doctor who had also warned us that the treatment in question a month after recommending she start the treatment immediately. Danielle and I were both angry. I always tried to limit the anger we expressed to each other, to diffuse the emotions that were charging our conversations. However, I couldn't stop Danielle from worrying about her ever-present problems, especially not while she was laying awake at night with those concerns running on repeat. I didn't understand what was occurring until it was too late to fix. I was becoming more aware of how ill-prepared I was for the challenges we faced. I was able to be supportive for the week leading up to surgery, despite having another excessive work schedule through Christmas season. I was expecting to work 12 out of the next 13 days, and my only day off being our trip to Phoenix to fix the dislodged tube. I, against the needs of the restaurant, had reserved the entire day off to help my wife with the endeavor. Christmas Eve the following day would be my longest day with 2 morning deliveries and a busy night of reservations. Thankfully, Christmas was just an overbooked evening shift that started in the afternoon. Then the unthinkable happened. The surgeon had to cancel and reschedule the surgery the day before we were to go in. His receptionist explained that he could only do Christmas Eve, which was impossible for me. The same couple that left during Thanksgiving had also decided to leave for Christmas vacation too, which left me picking up the slack and meant that we were short 2 servers. I couldn't leave them down 3 servers on the busiest night of the season. It was a super tough decision for me to make, but Danielle also understood the circumstances. I think because of her loyalty to her friend who owned the restaurant, she didn't push the issue. Danielle and I were frustrated at the couple who left, but there was nothing we could do. The next earliest appointment was the following Tuesday. We were going to have to wait another week, with Danielle worried about still having a tube stuck in her vagina. She was worried even more about a potential infection, and it was becoming a huge stressor. The thought of having a vaginal infection was something that she could not get off her mind. It started to stress me out managing Danielle's concerns. The following week at work was the most stressful of my entire life. I was working 2 to 3 shifts every single day, with only short breaks to run home and handling a piling list of chores. It was by far the most impressive display of my natural endurance. Somehow I was still able to make sure to complete everything Danielle needed of me. Accomplishing tasks were easy, but meeting her emotional needs was a far greater challenge. I was becoming emotionally erratic and unable to communicate properly, especially if the topic under discussion was emotionally charged. Topics like her family started to become almost off-limit topics. I couldn't talk about them without getting upset, and Danielle noticed this fact. I was even useless at this time to address the concerns she was having about the doctor. My frustrations and anger were too strong for me to control. In moments of weakness or exhaustion, I was making grave mistakes. My responses were not loving and kind, but filled with irritation. A perfect storm to create the worst Christmas ever. As much as we tried to make it a beautiful morning, my behavior was still a serious issue. The more frequent slips had become almost commonplace as my mental exhaustion took over. I tried to cope and tried everything in my power to maintain a good balance within myself, but I wasn't succeeding. I was failing miserably. Danielle held me accountable for every action, whether I was aware of it or not. Christmas morning was very tense. Danielle was constantly expecting me to fail despite my efforts to fix my problems. On top of that, I couldn't excuse myself to smoke some tobacco. No morning delivery meant I couldn't sneak a puff, so my anxiety levels were high. Danielle's problems just antagonized my anxieties to be worse. I tried my best to be the best person I could that day and didn't do a bad job. But that still didn't undo my past mistakes. She was holding every mistake I made over my head. My failures were pushing us apart. I hate to say it, but the Christmas season didn't include much in the way of communications from people in Danielle's life. There were those few students that always sent cute and uplifting texts, but the Christmas spirit seemed to skip over Danielle. Community didn't reach out at all, and the anger that Danielle had towards that was huge. After I left for work, she didn't hear from anyone, and I don't believe any of her family even called her on Christmas. Danielle was devastated when I arrived home that night. Danielle felt abandoned, and my behavior was now adding to it. Usually I was the one that was easing her abandonment issues, but I was emotionally abandoning her too. I was becoming more distant in an attempt to get myself under control. I figured that if I just did all the tasks that Danielle would be happy with me. I could perform anything physically, such as cooking, shopping, showers, and a foot rub. No chore was too much for me. Danielle's pain eclipsed my pain, pushing me past any previous limits. I was happy to be of service to my wife, but in my blind pride, I was making a huge mistake. A mistake that had been building for months. I made it through the weekend and that following Monday at work. It was stressful, but I was also relieved that I could finally have a 2-day break from work. I ended up working 13 days straight without a single day or shift off, picking up 2 shifts the week prior because of the rescheduled surgery. I was exhausted and expecting a little break from the mayhem. I was not going to be so lucky. Thank you for listening. Please feel free to like, share, or comment on any of the free chapters from the website dancingbeyondcancer.com. It is a story that must be shared to help others face the challenges of cancer. More chapters available every Monday. You can support the author on dancingbeyondcancer.com by purchasing the book, making a donation, or making a pledge on Patreon. As always, thank you again for all the continued support.